What happens when 10 cheap, garage-built drones take on the largest nuclear power plant in Europe, protected by billions of dollars in Russian defenses? Ukraine answered that question with one of the most precise and dangerous drone missions of the war. This is the story of how a $400 drone outsmarted Russia's most advanced air defense systems, slipped through a nuclear fortress, and struck the very brain of a $5.7 billion power plant. At exactly 5 a.m. this late September 2025, 10 Ukrainian drones were less than a minute away from striking a facility no one ever expected to be attacked. Their target wasn't the reactors of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the largest in Europe, but something more subtle and arguably more decisive: the plant's $50 million training and simulation center. This wasn't a barrage of missiles or a massive bombardment. It was a swarm of KH-7 drones, each weighing barely a pound and a half, carrying a shaped charge warhead of just over 3 pounds. At $400 apiece, their cost was almost trivial. But through the live feed of one lead drone's camera, the objective loomed. On the operator's display, a small icon marked distance to the active reactor core: 984 feet. Close enough to make the mission look insane. But Ukraine wasn't trying to trigger a meltdown. This was a precision strike. Destroying the training center would cripple Russia's ability to safely operate its 6 VVER-1000 reactors at Zaporizhzhia. That simulator was where Russian engineers practiced managing reactor systems, learning how to prevent incidents that could escalate into disaster. By removing it, Ukraine wasn't threatening Europe with radiation. It was undermining Russia's ability to keep the plant functioning at all. 9 miles away, inside a concealed bunker near Orikhiv, a Ukrainian operator sat hunched over an aging laptop, guiding the drones. His uplink broadcast used a 5.8 GHz frequency hopping signal, changing channels 1,000 times every second. To Russian electronic warfare units, it appeared as a ghost, a constantly moving, untraceable signal impossible to jam. On his tactical map, the target was surrounded by overlapping rings of defenses. A massive red circle marked the footprint of a Krasuka 4 electronic warfare system, which could blanket everything within 186 miles with jamming interference. Nearby, an S-400 Triumph surface-to-air missile system scanned the skies with its gravestone radar. On paper, Zaporizhzhia was one of the hardest sites in the world to attack. Planning for this mission began 3 months earlier. Ukraine's 47th Drone Brigade developed a plan not in the air, but in the water. The problem was simple. How do you get 10 tiny drones past one of the densest defense networks in the war? The answer: you don't fly them over, you smuggle them underneath. At 4:30 a.m., under heavy morning fog, a Marichka autonomous underwater vehicle slipped into the Dnipro River from a disguised civilian fishing boat. For half an hour, it moved silently through the water, invisible to radar, sonar, and drones above. At 4:55 a.m., the diversion phase began. 2 modified R-360 Neptune missiles roared into the air near Zaporizhzhia. Their target wasn't the plant itself, but a BM-30 Smerch multiple rocket launcher nearby. To civilians, it was just a heavy truck carrying rockets. To Ukrainian planners, it was a direct threat, capable of launching salvos that could shred the entire drone swarm out of the sky. By eliminating it before the main strike, Ukraine removed one of the most dangerous obstacles. As Russian forces scrambled to understand what happened to their rocket launcher, another part of the plan unfolded in Enerhodar. A 5-man Ukrainian Special Operations Unit, disguised and embedded in the occupied city for weeks, moved into action. Their objective: neutralize the anti-drone nets strung around the perimeter of the nuclear plant. With a handheld jammer, they opened a small, temporary gap, just enough for the drones to slip through. At precisely 5 a.m., the Marichka surfaced in reeds just over 3 miles from the plant. Its hatch opened, and 10 KHS-7 drones rose into the air. 8 dropped low, hugging terrain at an altitude of about 130 feet, while 2 climbed high to 500 feet. These 2 carried dummy warheads. Their purpose wasn't to hit anything. They were decoys, deliberately exposing themselves to draw Russian fire. It was a textbook feint. The S-400 Triumph system was the first to react. Built to destroy bombers and cruise missiles, it was a $200 million weapon tasked with hunting targets it was never designed to fight. Against drones weighing just over a pound, its effectiveness was questionable. But when 2 blips appeared on its radar, the operators reacted by the book. The Krasuka 4 system added its brute force, flooding the airwaves with jamming noise. But the drone's NVIDIA Jetson Nano AI chips kept them alive. That chip, essentially a component you could find in consumer robotics kits, gave the KHS-7 2 decisive capabilities. First, it ran the frequency hopping algorithm that let the drones constantly evade jamming. Second, it provided visual navigation. Even with GPS signals jammed, the drones compared live camera feeds of the ground to preloaded satellite maps, allowing them to fly without external guidance. Their physical design added another edge. Constructed from carbon fiber, weighing just over a pound and a half without payload, they were nearly invisible on radar. Their radar signature was smaller than a sparrow. The S-400's algorithms deliberately filtered out such small returns to avoid wasting multi-million-dollar missiles on birds. That filter allowed the real strike drones to slip through, almost invisible. At 5:02 a.m., the S-400 fired. 2 missiles streaked toward the decoy drones. From the Ukrainian operator's perspective, this was success. The expensive defenses were being distracted. But the situation was tense. The decoy's video feeds flickered under the weight of Russian jamming, and an Orlan 10 surveillance drone overhead visually confirmed them. Russian operators lowered radar sweeps closer to where the real strike group was flying. At this moment, the Ukrainian Special Operations Ghost team made its most critical move. At 5:02 and 40 seconds, they activated a compact electronic warfare device. Instead of blocking the Krasuka's jamming, it mimicked and corrupted it, creating a localized zone of meaningless interference. For Russian operators, already focused on the decoys, the extra noise blurred their situational awareness. Seconds later, the S-400 missiles struck and destroyed the decoys. The Russian command net celebrated 2 kills. In reality, they had spent millions eliminating $800 worth of disposable drones. The 7 real strike drones had slipped through the defenses. By 5:03, they were inside the final perimeter. For Russian commander Sergei, monitoring the attack, the situation became dangerous. The drone's flight path brought them between Russian defensive positions and the reactor buildings. Any engagement carried catastrophic risks. Every stray missile, every round of gunfire could damage sensitive infrastructure and trigger an international disaster. Panzer S-1 air defense turrets and Mi-28 Havoc attack helicopters engaged carefully, forced to fire with precision. Their hesitation gave Ukraine a window, but they still proved effective. 1 drone after another was destroyed. 4, then 5, then 6. From the operator's screen in Orikhiv, it looked like the mission was collapsing. But 1 drone remained. Using the chaos of exploding decoys and shredded wingmen as cover, the last operator maneuvered his drone through the dead zones, spaces where Russian gunners couldn't risk firing. The drone darted unpredictably, threading between buildings and defensive lines. Its target wasn't large, not even obvious. A small ventilation intake, no bigger than a pizza box, is on the 3rd floor of the training center. That was the entry point. At 80 miles per hour, the drone plunged into the vent, the operator threading it like a needle. For Russian radar operators, the contact disappeared. It seemed destroyed. But in reality, it had entered the building. Inside the ductwork, the operator flew blind, relying on preloaded 3D blueprints memorized over months of preparation. Left turn, right turn, short vertical climb. Then the objective appeared: the server racks and power conduits for the reactor simulator. At 5:03 and 43 seconds, the operator armed the warhead and drove the drone forward. The feed cut to static. A muffled crack followed. Outside, guards saw only a puff of smoke from a vent. Inside, the shaped charge punched through reinforced concrete, vaporized the servers, and severed the main power bus. The $50 million simulator was destroyed. The impact wasn't measured in fireballs, but in time. Russian state media went silent. Independent estimates calculated that 18 months and more than $60 million would be required to rebuild the simulator. For those 18 months, Russia would be unable to train new reactor operators at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Ukraine, without ever threatening a meltdown, had seized the plant's operational future. The cost of the strike? A handful of $400 drones, an old laptop, and months of planning. For the price of a used car, Ukraine had executed a strategic blow that no billion-dollar system could prevent. So here's the question. With a nuclear power plant just 984 feet away, would you have taken the shot?